You may be seated. Good morning. It is wonderful to be with you all this morning. Thank you for having me. One calm summer evening, author Jeff Charlotte was listening to Christian radio. A preacher from the Midwest with an amiable voice came on. Quite a few years ago, the preacher mused, we went to the coast. I was studying on the beach while my 3 teenage boys were out in the ocean. His 3 boys frolicked in the waves. The preacher read his Bible on the shore. Sound sifted away until the preacher heard his wife. "Honey," she yelled, "do you hear the boys hollering for help?" The preacher looked up and listened. When he heard his son's cries, he dropped his Bible in the sand and sprinted to the water as his children fought against the waves. "Only problem," said the radio preacher, "I was wearing blue jeans. Have you ever tried to swim in blue jeans?" His legs were heavy. "The undercurrent," said the preacher. "The undertow. I was drowning myself," he observed. Jeff Charlotte, the one listening to this story on the radio, can't really explain what happened next. The radio signal stayed strong, and the preacher kept talking about his attempts to swim. Evidently, he survived. His 3 boys, he never did mention. The preacher spoke more about the weight of his jeans. "The weight of our lives," he said. "The weight," he said, "is anything that distracts us from God." That was all that mattered. On and on he went about the baggage weighing us down. On and on he went about waterlogged jeans. Charlotte relays this story in his latest book as an example of myopic vision, of focusing on a relatively insignificant detail in the face of much bigger, more important cultural forces. Having just recently come off the most intense week of the Christian year, I suspect many of us, whether or not we identify as preachers, have been marinating in our own wet denim. It is not hard to do. At the Cathedral where I currently serve in Boise, my Holy Week checklist included the following tasks: remind ushers when to turn off the lights during the stripping of the altar, print copies of John's Passion narrative, text James Farwell about the Paschal candle blessing. Thank you, James. Give an acolyte a lighter in case the Paschal candle blows out during the procession, which it did. Bring a cooler of ice to the sacristy. All of these tasks felt important at the time. The effect of ending the Maundy Thursday service in total darkness is quite powerful. Blessing the Paschal candle pleased our altar guild chair, and if you do not think that matters, think again. And since we were going through the trouble of using sparkling wine for communion on Easter Sunday, we were certainly going to ensure it was properly chilled. As someone who cares very much about liturgy, you will never hear me suggest that such details do not matter. They do matter. But they only matter for the same reason this morning's service was thoughtfully planned and prepared. Because good liturgy is good pastoral care. And what matters far more than lighters and coolers is whether the people of God are being well cared for. Are those who are spiritually or physically hungry being fed? Are those who are lonely being brought into fellowship? Are those who are sick receiving care? Are those who grieve being comforted? Are those who are drowning being saved? The early church understood quite clearly where to focus their attention. In today's reading from the Acts of the Apostles are doing many signs and wonders among the people. And the people are so eager for healing that they carry their sick into the streets on mats and on cots in order that Peter's shadow might fall on some of them as he comes by. A great number of people also gather from neighboring towns, bringing the sick and those tormented by unclean spirits. All who come to the apostles are cured. Luke tells us that other disciples did not dare join the apostles at the temple gates, presumably because of the risk of arrest. Yet even in the face of such risk, the apostles continue in their teaching and fellowship and in their care for God's people. Because of their ministry, the apostles are arrested. It is predictable that the early church would clash with settled authority. In this case, the clash is with Roman and temple authorities, but established institutions of all kinds have a deep interest in keeping things as they are, even when the status quo is a status of inequity and suffering. Prison is a common solution in such situations. We have seen this again and again throughout history. Just look up at these walls for another example of when arrest was used as a tactic to silence those who clearly understood and prioritized the needs of God's people. But prison walls cannot stop the early followers of Jesus any more than they would stop Dr. King. The angel who releases the apostles from prison says, "Go, stand in the temple, and tell the people the whole message about this life." And that is what they do. As soon as the prison doors open, the apostles go right back to the temple, and they go on with their teaching and healing. They will be arrested again, but even so, they will not stop because people are drowning. Go and tell the people the whole message about this life. The undercurrents that continue to threaten our collective wholeness are real. We live in a culture that socializes risk and privatizes benefits. A culture that rewards the few for leaving behind the many. A culture that settles for a troubling status quo. And our task as the church is to focus on the water, not on our blue jeans. Our task as the church is to prioritize the needs and concerns of the people of God. This past Maundy Thursday, as I was knee-deep in liturgical logistics, my community helped me see what really mattered. A man came forward to participate in the foot washing. He had multiple bags with him, including a sleeping mat and a blanket. With great effort, the man sat down on the chancel steps where several members of the cathedral knelt beside him to help him remove his shoes and his socks. The foot washing the man received that evening was no symbolic act. It was the closest he had come to a bath or to physical touch in over a week. Not every action we take will change the world, but any action we take can change a life, including our own. Following in the apostles' teaching and fellowship requires the willingness to stand up to whatever restrictions we encounter, whether those restrictions come in the form of myopic vision, prison walls, or preachers focused on pants instead of people. We must go and tell the people the whole message. That the risen Christ dwells among us and invites all of us, to share in abundant, liberated, grace-filled life.